We would have to amend this agenda.
My wife was sick.
Meeting, please come to order. Clerk, read the roll.
Avedisian.
Yep.
Buell. Here. Caban. Camilleri.
Here.
DeBella.
Here.
Galligan. Gardeau. Hall.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Hoffman. Holloway. Iono. LeBeau. Lester.
Here.
Magnan.
Here.
Murata.
Here.
Osgood. Payne.
Here.
Patel. Salemi. Salmonides. Sweezy.
Here.
Taylor. Torres. Vecino. Carrier. We have a quorum.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Never forget that. I'm doing it 2 years.
Nobody's here.
Item number 4. Okay. Approval of the minutes meeting of December the 10th, 2018.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Are there any additions or deletions? Being there none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Item 5, public comments relative to agenda items. Okay, item 6. For the purpose of an amendment, was that the Board of Finance? The Board of Finance on bonding, I'm going to ask that if there's no objection, that we put it onto the, it doesn't require, I understand, yeah. And we're going to put that onto the agenda. It was dealt with at the Board of Finance tonight. If there's no objection to placing it on the agenda so it can be amended, is there objection? Being there no objection, I would insert it an item between 8 and 9, which would make it the first item on the agenda would be 9A. Okay. Report from the district chairman. Nothing. Report from the chief executive officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief tonight, although we have a long report for the month. I'm just going to skim over some of the highlights. So, as most of you are aware, we did submit our integrated plan to the state DEEP. We did have our public commenting period and questions. We have received support from most of our member towns. We're waiting a letter from the town of Wethersfield. We did receive a letter from the town of West Hartford holding back their approval. They had a number of questions they asked us to discuss with them regarding stormwater infrastructure. And we did have a very good meeting, and Mr. Chairman, you might want to talk about this. Last week, we had a meeting with the Energy Subcommittee in the town of West Hartford. Town of Hartford. Very good meeting, and we do believe we'll receive a letter of support from the town of Hartford.
Yeah, after you get through,
Okay.
I'll talk.
No
about
problem.
it.
And also, awaiting the finalization of the Sioux Years ad valorem work group study. We're expecting, there's been a few comments back and forth, but we do expect to have that report completed for the beginning of February or sooner, and then we will present that to the town managers and finance directors for their review. Also, important note, we have been successful and will, on January 14th, bring on board a manager of labor relations to support Bob Zeich in HR. We plan to give a full update to PP&I on the workers' comp and the wellness program, and also to introduce the new person who will be starting on the 14th. We did get a request from the town of Windsor asking to discuss the high school program, the Learn to Earn program that we've initiated and developed with our Bloomfield commissioners and the superintendent of Bloomfield schools. They are interested in possibly joining that program. So we are going to be talking with them, and I'll probably have our commissioners from Bloomfield be part of that discussion so they can talk Windsor through that. And then we are going to be having a meeting with the technical staff of both Hartford and East Hartford to talk about a possible MOU and how we initiate the needed study for the dike system. As most of you know, we've been waiting to get the Army Corps of Engineers to approve the study and therefore get it approved through the funding process through the federal government. We have not yet seen that funding authorization, so we are anticipating possibly not receiving any monies for that study, which is about $3.6 million for both sides of the river. So one concept could be, if the board so chose, to enter into an agreement with both Hartford and East Hartford. And MDC has two water mains that cross the dike system south and north of the Oakley Bridge. So we would possibly enter in a joint agreement that we would do the study together in anticipation of some sort of shovel-ready program that we don't want to miss out on. So we'll be having that discussion. We'll be bringing that back to the board for their consideration. And with that, Mr. Chairman, if you want to talk about that meeting?
Yeah, we had a meeting, what was it, last Tuesday, with the Hartford Economic Development Committee relative to the question of the integrated plan. And at that meeting, there was obviously participation. There was participation by the committee and citizens. We attended it. I believe there was Commissioner Yano was there, Commissioner Buell, Caban, myself, and the Chief Executive Officer, and we discussed in detail the issue. And I believe there were four council people there that were on the committee. And in the process, several citizens were raising the question of the escalation of the water rates because of the specific program. And we got into that program and explained to them that it's not an issue of us just raising it, that it's a direct cost of a responsibility that we have to a consent order established by the federal and the state government. And we were very aware of what the ramifications of the increases have been, and pointed out that our operating budget has gone from 702 people down to about 489, I think, now. And we've made reductions, and that there's going to be increases, more increases. And then our chief executive officer explained to him the affordability aspect of it and some of the problems that that's going to cause. And one of the reasons for the integrated plan was to spread it out more to try to control the escalation of those charges. And the meeting, I think, ended up as a very cooperative meeting. It was a difficult meeting because people are experiencing significantly in Hartford the escalation. And this Thursday night we have an NRZ in the south end of Hartford that's basically going to address the same question. And we're going to have participation with our staff and some of the commissioners at that meeting. That's Thursday night at, 6 o'clock?
6, Chris? Yeah, 6.
6 o'clock at the St. Augustine's Church Hall, which is in the basement. And again, I think what we're going to have to do as a commission, and that's one of the reasons we had this speakers bureau we're developing, so that we can go out and discuss this with community groups, with both our staff and our commissioners, and to anybody else that wants to participate in that process because of the escalation. And obviously, as we deal with this issue, we're going to need additional help, and that's got to come from some kind of national infrastructure bill because we just don't have the resources to meet that cost without it costing people a lot of money in terms of what that cost is to us. And it's escalates the water bill, which doesn't help the sale of water either. So it's going to be a process that we're going to have to discuss. But at the end of the meeting, the committee unanimously approved, the approval was recommending this action tonight to the Hartford City Council. So it was a very a good meeting. It was back and forth with community people as well as the commissioner of the council people on the committee. And I want to commend our commissioners for being there. They all contributed. Everybody explained the issue, and being there, I was very proud of the performance of our people because you do participate and you understand what we're doing. And after the meeting, I had three of the council people come up and say that to me, that they were really impressed with the knowledge that our commissioners have. So it's a very positive thing in my assessment.
Chairman, can you, I know we submitted the integrated plan. Can you just talk about the process in terms of we need to get approval then, and what does it mean to have the support of our member towns? Because I know it's been a discussion with West Hartford. I know you've offered to get out and speak to anybody, answer any questions. And so I want to make sure we know what is the impact if West Hartford didn't end up supporting it? What happens then?
Well, it wouldn't be a positive thing, obviously, but again, I think that West Hartford will be supportive of it, but again, I can't guarantee that. It would be much better if we're unanimous in what we're doing. I think one of the issues that is being raised is the whole question of storm sewers, and West Hartford knows that that's not a responsibility of the Metropolitan District. That's one of the things that's excluded in our process, except what, in Hartford? Even Hartford, right?
Well, Hartford is a combined sewer system.
Combined sewer system. And it's something that West Hartford is going to have to deal with. And I'm sure the discussion they want to know is in the context of what it's going to be. And we've had discussions with them. In fact, there was a demonstration. Didn't we do storm sewers?
Pilot demonstration.
Pilot demonstration.
And Greenhurst.
And it's one of the problems that when you look at the sewer system where we have, I think it's 7 million gallons a day on a dry day. That means just waste is coming to us. And on a wet day, it's up to somewhere around 75 or 80,000 million gallons a day. So you can see the enormous flow. Rain meters are being discharged into that sewer, and it's basically one sewer, and a lot of people are using it as a storm sewer too. So that's contrary to where EPA wants to be as it stands. So it's a touchy situation, but it's something we got to deal with, and primarily the municipality is going to have to deal with it because they're in violation. Federal violation is in federal.
Yes.
EPA is the issue there. So,
And in addition to that, the question has been asked actually from West Hartford about how long will this approval take. The approval will take longer if the towns don't support the integrated plan. The only challenge that we have is not having the support from our towns. That Deep understands technically the integrated plan. This is truly about affordability, and without the town's support in explaining to Deep that this is in the best interest of their town, meaning how we actually pay for it and the affordability aspect of it, it will take longer to get the approval. And the longer it takes, the longer the system gets older and older, and we start to spend emergency money to fix things that could have been fixed. You know, our expectation is that this process could take at least a year, maybe longer. It took 2 years last time. And then there's another referendum to have. So the planning for referendum is a year in itself. So best case, you get a 1-year approval process with DEEP and then a year-long referendum educational program. So you're talking 2 years to do nothing. We can't really do any more than what we're doing right now.
Scott, could you also explain the federal legislation dealing with integration?
Yeah, so the
Just passed last
when
month.
we talk about affordability and we talk about integrated planning, those two definitions are defined by EPA themselves as guidelines. And so when we talk about affordability, we talk about the 2% rule. So the sewer service to a customer can't be any more than 2% of the median household income. That 2% of sewer service includes both the ad valorem cost to a customer, so the equivalency to the customer, and then the actual clean water project, which is the special sewer service charge or the clean water charge. Those two combined cannot exceed 2%. That's a guideline, and it's an affordability issue that DEEP or EPA follows. The integrated plan, again, is also a guideline as to, they support it, but it's a guideline. In NACWA and the entire organization, the entire industry has been fighting this battle for years, and they were successful in getting integrated planning and affordability approved through legislation. So the Senate and the Congress passed, the Congress passed it months ago, maybe even a year ago, but the Senate just passed it just before Christmas. So now it's law. And the question becomes, now that it's law, it's no longer a guideline, it's no longer something that we would hopefully have to fight with EPA over. We can point to the legislation, and hopefully that will help us get the approval sooner rather than later with the state of Connecticut. We'll see.
Questions? I'm sorry. Sure, go ahead.
So we're all clear on this. Under our consent orders and decrees, what happens is every 5 years, we're supposed to draw up and submit a new long-term control plan, which will discuss what's happening, what the plan is to reach the goals of the order and decree. The last time we did this, we spent 2 years going back and forth with DEEP over the plan itself, because you'll remember the original plan that was submitted was going to separate every street in Hartford. The cost turned out to have been about $5 billion, and the practicality of doing that made it a change in plan. So we submitted the South Tunnel, and then there was an argument over whether there could ever be a discharge to the Weathersfield Cove, and what did we mean by no discharge? Well, when you say that there'll never be a discharge, the fact of the matter is that if you have rain like they had in Houston, okay, you're going to have a discharge. There's no way to completely ensure that there won't ever be any discharges anywhere. So even in saying that we have drafted up this new tunnel and there will never be a discharge in Weathersfield Cove, that depends, okay? If you have a complete catastrophe of a hurricane, there's going to be discharges not only into Weathersfield Cove, but from basically every sewer in the city of Hartford. So we got into an argument over what was precisely meant. We agreed to basically shut off the CSOs that would have gone into Weathersfield Cove. That took 2 years to reach that agreement with Weathersfield. With DEEP. And
You were right.
yes, well, Weathersfield also was a challenge, let us say. But but that was done. Now, having done that, it's really only been 3 years since that approval, not 5 years. But DEEP was counting from when we submitted, not when they approved, so they required us to file again, even though it's probably, practically speaking, a little bit early to do that. We have submitted it in compliance with their orders. While there are orders on when we have to submit things, there are not part of the order when DEEP has to approve it. So it could, again, take 2 years. I can't tell you. I mean, there could be quite a struggle over this plan and over dealing with the north branch of the Park River and whether or not that is our plan is a practical plan and whether or not you should be focusing on an integrated plan. So having said all that, if legally DEEP turns us down on this plan, we have a period of time in which to resubmit. Or we could ask DEEP to modify the consent decree. That would then be subject to review by a federal court if they said no and pursued an enforcement action against us. And so that could drag out into quite a long period of time. From a practical standpoint, I would believe it's in the interest of all the member towns to get an integrated plan so that it's more affordable for everybody and we actually deal with all of the issues. As an example of that, I'd cite the north branch of the Park River. Even if we completely eliminate all of the CSO, combined sewer discharges to the north branch of the Park River, you will still have, on a load basis, almost 80% of what you've got today. So that the river will still not be usable for any recreational or other purpose. So that if you are going to address the north branch of the Park River, you have to look at not only the combined sewer discharges, but all the other pollution that's coming into that river from all of the parking lots and all of the other various areas, including areas in Bloomfield. So you can't fix the problems with our rivers simply by addressing the combined sewer discharges. And it's a long-term problem.
Don?
And if I would just like to add to what Bart said, so in the 2 years that it took us to get the approval for the last long-term control plan, what it cost the MDC and its member towns was $150 million because we got into an argument over what is elimination. In 2004, it was defined as an 18-year storm in writing. And we designed to an 18-year storm. And DEEP decided that their opinion of elimination is elimination. So the tunnel had to be oversized, and as Bart mentioned, we had to actually disconnect the overflows to the Weathersfield Cove, which means if there is a storm above a 100-year storm, that water will go into the streets of Hartford and then into the South Meadows Pump Station, which will be pumped into the Weathersfield Cove. But that all cost an extra $150 million. So that's the challenge that we have with DEEP is the argument typically turns out to cost our member towns more money, and it doesn't practically do anything to help anyone.
Tom?
Yep, thank you. You mentioned the City of Hartford having a letter coming soon and West Hartford holding off for a little while.
Yeah.
You didn't mention any of the other towns.
They're all
Did you get letters from
Yes.
all the other
all in
towns?
compliance.
Yes, we received letters from everyone except Weathersfield, and we received a letter from West Hartford, but it was holding back on their support until they understood. I have a letter that I'm sending out tomorrow which explains and answers their questions. And then the successful meeting that we had numerous meetings with Hartford over the last month, but a very successful meeting
So
with the
Hartford's-
subcommittee.
Hartford looks like it'll be signing something and sending it in, and then
Right,
we have
there's-
West Hartford that you're dealing with. And the problem that West Hartford has is that there's a lot of water going into the sewer systems from the households over in West Hartford. And Newington is experiencing the same thing, I believe.
Everybody is, yes. Most of our member towns have high groundwater tables in their towns.
And a lot
So
of
how can the
flag.
commissioners go back to their towns to deal with this problem? Can we get this on the agenda down the road so that, I mean, I know that the MDC tried a pilot program in Weathersfield, I believe, where you tried to address each individual house, and you had a difficult time getting into the houses, if I'm not mistaken?
We did a number of different pilot programs across the district, but we focused in Weathersfield, this is back in 2012-ish.
It's quite a while ago.
And we did a number of pilots to really look at technology as well. What kinds of lining, the issue we had on Lynbrook, what kinds of lining products are, it's such a, especially for lining the laterals, it's relatively new technology on the laterals to the home. So we did a number of pilots. The pilot programs we're talking about in West Hartford were actually to physically put a storm pipe in the street. The MDC paid for it, and the reason why we paid for it was we wanted to show the towns that if you have a viable solution for a resident or a business to discharge their private property groundwater to an infrastructure and not the MDC sewer, then that's a long-term solution. So those pilot programs were really to show the town engineering department that this is the solution. Part with the MDC and jointly build infrastructure as we're building infrastructure in your streets, that storm infrastructure will be owned by the town.
And that's that's pretty much the town's responsibility. Does the town have a right to go into these houses? I find it hard to believe that these sewer pipes are MDC pipes, and we don't have the legal ability to go in and double check to make sure that something is legally not being put into that system, either contaminants or extra water. We don't have that ability. We do have that ability.
We do, but the problem is, and I'll just use an example, back in 2006 or so, Southington, the town of Southington was having this, every town has, this is not an uncommon problem. And so the town, and other towns have done this, this town of Southington decided to fine people, charge them $100. And then it's the property owner's responsibility to prove that they aren't connected. The problem is the most difficult thing for a utility to do is to get into someone's house. The scheduling, the planning, and then to get back in. So someone could disconnect and they could reconnect very easily. And so it's a policing that we don't want to get involved in. We'd rather provide a real solution. And the problem is because our member towns have such high groundwater tables, that the challenge that we're having in West Hartford right now is the town's concern about when we do disconnect a home and we discharge that water to the backyard, that backyard happens to be someone's front yard or backyard, and so now we're having customers fighting with each other over the discharge of this water, and it's not, the ground doesn't percolate, so it doesn't drain. So the challenge that we're having is, with no infrastructure in the street to connect to, it's either leave it in the sewer system, which is not acceptable, or discharge it to the backyard, the side yard, or in some cases, the front yard. So that's the challenge that we're having right now in West Hartford.
Thank you.
Further questions?
But just a quick question about Newington. I know in East Hartford, which I'm very familiar with, it's only the sort of downtown older area of East Hartford ever had any kind of combined sewers, and most of those have been separated. The MDCs, and the rest of the town has separate storm and sanitary sewers.
Correct.
So while there may be the occasional, like some pump connected to the sanitary sewer, any place with serious groundwater problems is the water's transferred from the house to the business to the storm sewers and taken away. I think there were combined sewers in Newington, but I understand how the problem could still be if there's no sewer in the street. If there's no storm sewer in the street, you're going to put it in the MDC sewer. Right. Is that what we're talking about, Commissioner? So there are areas in Newington where there aren't any storm sewers. Same thing with West Hartford. There may be some. You're talking about some areas that don't have.
Even if a town has a storm sewer in the street, and this is common throughout the town, our towns, or any town, the storm sewer that's in the street is only sized to handle the storm associated with the street, not private property. Right. So
We're talking about groundwater.
No, I'm talking about street runoff. I'm talking about catch basins. You might have a storm system on a street in West Hartford or Newington or Weathersfield, and it's connected to the catch basins on the street, but that's it. And it's not sized properly to handle the inflow. You know, we're talking about, the chairman says this all the time, 8 million gallons a day of dry weather and 80 million gallons wet weather. Now, think about that. If that truly is, let's say half of that 80 is from leaky pipes. So it's our job to fix that, right? That's the MDCs. The other half is, let's pick a number, 30 MGD is associated with inflow. So the town's going to have a system that can handle 30 MGD. The pipes in those streets weren't designed to handle inflow from properties. So although we empathize with the towns, and it's not their fault, it's just that the only solution is, instead of continuing to build big tunnels and capture everything, the real solution is to get the stormwater out.
To separate it.
Right.
That's sort of what I was asking about. But we don't need to go any farther than that. Only to say that the North Branch of the Park River, I mean, I understand that we only have one overflow. It's the Albany Avenue. It's
4 overflows to the North Branch.
But they're all between when the tunnel between when it goes in the tunnel and back to Albany Avenue, and we don't need to build a tunnel to take care of those 4. That was.
Well, also cleaning up, what's that, a 2? That's a level 2, is the level 2, to clean that up to a level 1 and then dump it back into a level 2, which is a Connecticut River. Is it rational and is it economical? I don't think so, but that's deep. Further questions? Thank you, Scott.
Yep.
Okay. Item number 8. I'm sorry, Bart, did you have anything legal? Okay. Item number 8, District Clerk regarding service of tax warrants for fiscal year 2019.
There's a report included in your packets informing you that the tax warrants have been served on the member towns and receipts received.
Questions? Item 9A, which we added to the agenda from the Board of Finance. Could the clerk please read the
Let's read the title of it, or
title? Yeah, do we have anything that they can look at?
this is regarding possible 2013 revenue bond refunding, and we have John and
Okay,
to speak on it.
before you is the, let me,
I gave away my resolution.
is this the whole 7 million?
Yeah.
Regards to $7,425,000 bond redemption resolution to the Board of Finance for consideration on January 7th. Before the board, is there an amendment?
It's not an amendment. We didn't have a quorum for Board of Finance, and we still gave the presentation to brief them on the proposed redemption. And the commissioners wanted to address the district board and have you receive the same presentation and decide if you wanted to approve the resolution that was proposed to the Board of Finance.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What the discussion was at the Board of Finance was, in 2013, the district had its initial $85 million revenue bond issuance, and one of the maturities, which was the 2033 maturity in the amount of $7,425,000, had a 5% coupon. And in order to sell that to the book of business, we had a 5-year call on that. So as of April 1st, 2018, the call was due, so therefore it could be refunded. So what we have asked, and there was a white paper prepared by Hilltop Securities, and I'll introduce Adam Craig, he can walk you through there, is there's three options that the district has with regards to this maturity for $7,425,000. A, we can do nothing, but the 5% coupon is an interest rate greater than we need to pay. Option number two is we can redeem the $7,425,000 from the rate stabilization fund within the Clean Water Project, which there's sufficient balance to pay it down. Or three, we could do a new refunding revenue bond issue in the amount of $7,425,000 to take out this maturity. At this time, I'll kind of turn it over to Adam Craig, who's from Hilltop Securities, and he'll walk you through the three scenarios.
Did three, what would be the rate we'd get now about? 3% cheaper.
Good evening. As Mr. Zunzarella just mentioned, we have this $7,425,000 maturity. It's due in 2033, and the district has the option to pay it off early. And the three options, obviously, we can do nothing and just continue to pay 5% on that bond. Or there's two options, basically, to pay it off early. You could use the balance of your rate stabilization fund or some of your balance of the rate stabilization fund and just pay cash to pay it off and stop paying interest going forward. Or you can issue a new bond at a lower rate, and the projected rate for the new bond is 3.24%. That's a projection, so it would be 3.24% as opposed to the 5% you're paying now. So you'd still pay interest between now and 2033. You just pay less because of the lower interest rate. So there's really two pieces to this analysis. There's the cash flow going out. You're using the rate stabilization fund to either pay 5% between now and 2033. You're paying the rate stabilization fund to pay $7,425,000 and get rid of it now. That's scenario two. Or scenario three is to issue the new lower rate bonds and use the rate stabilization fund to pay it at a lower rate between now and 2033. Because you're using the rate stabilization fund, which is now invested at a rate of 1.39%, the second piece of this analysis is the loss in investment earnings. In scenario two, you pay $7 million right now to get rid of it. You're losing $7 million. That $7 million is not going to earn anything between now and 2033 because it's gone. In the other ones, the earnings slow down, at a much slower pace because you're paying out smaller pieces over time. So basically, that's the analysis that we did. And to sum it up, if you were to use $7,425,000 now to just pay it off, you would save $4,267,000 between now and 2033 over time by not paying any more interest. Even with the loss in investment earnings, you would save $4,267,000 as opposed to doing nothing. If you would issue that refunding bond at a lower rate, you would save $1,840,000. So you would still save money by doing the refunding bond, but you would save $3 million more by just paying it off now. So that's the sum of the analysis that we did on what your options are with this 2033 maturity. And obviously, Mr. Zunzarella and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. It's all net of the loss of
million.
Yeah.
Well, the $1 million, that's the million. What about the reduction in the rate? That's probably, another $800,000 or so?
The reduction in the rate saves $52,000 a year, and then you have to offset that with the loss of the 1.39%.
A substantial saving. Further questions? Rich?
When did it mature?
7 years?
In 2033.
Oh, 33. 13 years, 14 years.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Your recommendation was to eliminate it now?
Yes, option number two, pay it down now.
No.
Sure. We agreed that at Board of Finance Commission that Commissioner Hoffman would make the motion here for us, and it's basically a resolution to do this. So you want to go ahead and...
I was going to recognize.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you knew that we were going to have him do that, so...
No, I knew there was an amendment. I didn't know, but is there an amendment?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner?
Yes, Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman. I know it's kind of hard to find me so far to the left, but But
Are you comfortable there?
I'm very comfortable right now because I have a better camera angle.
Your left and it's his right, so
I understand. How could I lose? So let me just offer this amendment as follows. Taking the wording from the Finance Committee's page 4-1, 4-1, the recommendation would be as follows, that the district board, taking out Board of Finance, that the district board finds, based on the recommendation of Hilltop Securities, so forth and so on, as it states in that motion. So that would be the case that we would, as a district board, make a public vote on that recommendation, since we could not take one up at finance.
The amendment is option two, to pay the $7,425,000.
That's correct. I'll second the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Further question? I think it's fairly obvious. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? On the main motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Item number 9, referral to the Water Bureau, the Bureau of Public Works regarding 6 Victory Street, Bloomfield. Recommended action, refer to the Bureau of Public Works. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 10, consideration of impossible action regarding amendment of the 2019 miscellaneous water rates resolution. Recommended action, receive the report and adopt the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 11, Committee on Government Consideration and Possible Action regarding appointment of legislative consultants. January 7th, 2019 is recommended motion, receive the report and adopt the resolution. Is there a motion?
Yeah.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, this was brought up at the Government Committee, and it was passed unanimously in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any further discussion? Commissioner?
Discussion at the government committee, I did not hear discussion at that time about the fees that would be paid to these various consultants. And I wonder, the consultant that's being added certainly has a strong record with the city of Hartford, but it's not a government lobbyist, city government lobbyist. And I'm wondering how we came up with the fees that these various agencies would be paid. Because that one is the highest, I think, 1,000 versus 40%.
Well, it's not.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, that individual and that firm is replacing 2 of our existing lobbyists, or 2 of our 2018 lobbyists, and they'll be doing that for the 2019 session. The total fees associated with those lobbyists was the $50,000. This particular individual and firm, in addition to having a strong background in leadership, in diversity issues, in advocacy on those issues, and having a presence both at the federal, state, and local level, we thought and still feel that was well suited to our mission at the Capitol, what our obstacles might be in the coming session, what our opportunities might be in the coming session, and we think we suggest would be a valuable added member to the team. The overall budget for the MDC and lobbies will remain the same. There's no increase in the overall budget. She would be, in this firm, would be available to us, dedicated to us, as a new venture for her. Her primary focus will be on the MDC.
If I could just add to that, Mr. Chairman. In this coming legislative session, one of the primary issues is going to be the adoption of the state water plan. You'll remember from last year that at the 11th hour, the words that public trust were inserted into the state water plan which led to a stalemate at the legislature because we were unsure, what do you mean by public trust? Since the most recent elections, if anything, I think the exposure to the MDC and other water companies on the issue of public trust has increased, not decreased. And as part of our strategy of trying to at least get a resolution of what do you mean when you say that you're holding water in a public trust, that could mean anything from as generic as the MDC is a public trust to things like California and Hawaii, which have decided that in adopting any new or even existing uses can be re-examined, registrations are no longer valid, and registrations can be overridden by an agency declaring that it is in the public interest to override the registration. If you override the registration of the MDC, that means the amount of water that you have to sell is decreased. And it can be decreased for environmental reasons, it can be decreased for other reasons. So this is and those limitations on the registrations in those two states have been done without compensation. So they have simply taken the water from somebody who previously had a recognized right to that water and redistributed that water in a manner that the state thought was in the best interest of the public. So that's an issue, to put it mildly. And in order to effectively advocate for our side, one of the key issues coming up this year will be the municipalities, Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, and the representatives from those municipalities whose support we're going to need in order to get an orderly resolution of this issue. There is great exposure at this time.
Further discussion?
I appreciate that. Could I just ask a couple things? One, that at the end of 2019, we get a summary of the services provided by the three firms. This is a new firm,
Gladly.
And then last year, we had good updates on the legislative action from, I believe it was Attorney Stone. We can get that for this year.
He does it every year.
And to be clear, we're going to need the participation of the commissioners this year.
Further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 12, Bureau of Public Works, consideration and possible action regarding Westbrook Village abandonment, January 7, 2019. Recommended action is receive the report and adopt the resolution. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion.
That was approved in Public Works unanimously.
Further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Oh, there's a second piece to this, I'm sorry. Item B, Town Center West reimbursement agreement, January 7th, 2019. Recommended action is receive the report. Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this was approved also in Public Works.
Further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstention.
Thank you, Rich. Item 13, consideration of impossible action regarding settlement of pending litigation. Maureen Rodriguez?
Yeah.
C?
I'm sorry, 12C. Yep.
So 12C says executive session, so they're gonna probably do that
Together?
last, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have two, we have, this should be 12C. Settlement of pending litigation, Carlin Contracting versus MDC in executive session. And 13, consideration and possible action regarding settlement of pending litigation, Marie Rodriguez versus MDC. We combine these two for an executive session. If there's no objection, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye for an executive session. Opposed? Okay, executive session, please.
And I would need Attorney Sweeney,
Can't
Mr.
approve.
Cinzarella, Attorney.
All set? Anybody else? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, item C of 12, settlement of pending litigation.
So move the resolution.
Discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying, oh, is this an amendment that we get?
No.
Was the recommendation settlement?
Yep.
Okay, settlement, okay. All those in favor of the main motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Item 13. Consider, is there a motion to adopt? It's been moved and seconded. Second. Discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Opportunity for general public comment. Commissioners' questions and comments. Other business.
Oh,
Go ahead, Denise.
just one question. Do we have any update on our discussions with DEEP and the
We have
discharge?
not had any more discussions. We moved, we made the counteroffer. I don't think we're going to hear from this administration. I think it'll go into the next administration. Have you heard anything back, Larry? More than likely be the situation.
Thank you.
There's a new commissioner and a new governor. Any further discussion? Is the motion to adjourn is in order? We're moved without objection. We stand adjourned.